Module 2. Food, Health and Safety. Unit 2.1, Exercise 1B, page 36.
Mirror, mirror on the wall. In the beginning, I put it down to a simple case of exam nerves. My daughter Sarah had just turned 16 and was studying hard for her GCSEs. I knew she'd do well, as she was top of the class in all her subjects at school and had always been a high achiever. But as the time for the exams drew nearer, her behaviour started to change, drastically. Sarah became sullen and withdrawn. She wasn't the lively teenager I knew. But the most worrying thing of all was that she was hardly eating anything. She refused to eat with the rest of the family and was having only light snacks in her room. At the time, I didn't want to make a big deal of it, as I thought I'd just make her more anxious about her exams. I was convinced that once she'd taken the exams, she would soon settle down and everything would get back to normal. But it didn't. In fact, it got worse. By the middle of the summer, Sarah had become very skinny and pale. She also had wild mood swings, bursting into tears or becoming enraged by the slightest thing. I should say at this point that my initial reactions to this situation weren't very helpful. We had huge fights about her being too thin, and I tried to persuade her to eat more, but she just turned her nose up at everything I offered her. When nothing I said or did seemed to make any difference, I really felt at a complete loss about what else I could do or who I could turn to. I was desperate. After a lot of thought, I realized that I would have to try other tactics. Screaming and tearing my hair out were definitely not improving the situation. I started by looking up eating disorders on various websites to get as much information as I could. And what I found out almost scared me to death. Anorexia nervosa is a condition that typically affects teenage girls. There are a variety of reasons as to why it can develop, but it is usually said to be because of a distorted body image and lack of self-esteem. Some young women think they are too fat, even when they are not, and feel that they are unattractive or worthless. The media have been accused of playing a role in the rise of eating disorders in recent years because of the way they portray women. Using underweight models in adverts in glossy magazines and on television may be a factor in encouraging young women to equate thinness with beauty, glamour, and success. I was shocked to discover that this disease can seriously damage the heart and make bones brittle and easy to break. However, the most frightening aspect of the condition is that in 10% of cases, it leads to the death of the sufferer. The information was terrifying, but it helped me to come to terms with the fact that someone with a severe eating disorder needs love and support and urgent medical attention. It took a lot of calm and gentle persuasion to get my tearful daughter to agree to go with me to a doctor who specializes in eating disorders. That was 2 years ago, and the road to recovery has been long and hard. Sarah spent 2 months in hospital to get her weight back to normal, and since then she has been seeing a psychiatrist to help her deal with the underlying causes of the problem. It was tough for me too. I felt very guilty about her illness, that somehow it was my fault, and I was a bad mother who had caused her daughter so much anxiety she had started to starve herself. But we've managed to get through it together. Now Sarah's looking forward to starting university. The colour has returned to her cheeks, and she is back to being the vibrant young woman she was before the whole dreadful nightmare started.
Unit 2.3, Exercise 6, page 41.
Live long and prosper. Food and nutrition expert Peter Bennett reports on his trip to a pretty fishing village on one of the islands of Okinawa, Japan, to find out why the people there live so long.
When I first met Makoto Okishima, I would have said that she was 75, perhaps 80 years old. In fact, she is 100 years old, which is not at all unusual in Okinawa. She is just one of more than 400 people there who are at least 100 years old. Okinawa has the highest and healthiest concentration of centenarians in the world. I had come to find out the secret of these healthy islanders' longevity, and a stroll down to the waterfront with Makoto provided me with my first clue. After passing elderly fishermen unloading the day's catch, Makoto joined a queue at a market stall to buy fish for the evening meal. It seems the people of Okinawa eat plenty of fish, which is a healthy food and very low in calories. After we arrived at Makoto's house, I watched with fascination as Makoto prepared the food with her daughter, who also looked younger than her 76 years. As well as the fish, there were portions of sweet potato, spring onion, and other fresh, locally grown vegetables. There was also plenty of brown rice and tofu, a soya product high in protein and vitamins. On other days there might be a meat dish too, but the fat would be continuously poured off the meat as it cooked. After the meal we drank green tea, which is said to have many health benefits and helps burn calories as well. There were no sugary drinks and only a little locally produced rice wine, which the Okinawans firmly believe helps to prevent illnesses. I asked Makoto what she thought the secret to her good health was.
Well, as you see, we have a healthy, low-fat diet, and we eat slowly to savour our food,
she told me.
But it's also important to stay active. That way you don't get fat.
I suddenly realised I hadn't seen a single overweight person since my arrival in Okinawa. On my last day, Makoto took me to the outskirts of the village. There, facing the sea, was an old stone marker. I asked what the Japanese characters engraved on it meant. My translator told me,
"At 70, you are still a child. At 80, a young man or woman. And if at 90 someone from heaven invites you over, tell him to go away and come back when you are 100.
Before flying home, I met Dr. Davis Billings, who has studied Okinawa centenarians for more than a decade. He told me that life-threatening complaints such as cancer, diabetes and heart disease are rare in Okinawa. It seems that Okinawans not only live longer, they live better.
Unit 2.4, Exercise 10, page 43.
Hi, Sophie. Hi, Bill. How are you two getting on with your revision for the exams?
Oh, it's going okay, I suppose. But Mark, you look awful. What's the matter with you?
I don't know, really. I just don't seem to have any energy these days. It's really getting me down. What do you think I should do?
If I were you, I'd get some of those high-energy drinks. What do you think, Bill?
I'm not so sure. I think you'd better see your doctor, Mark.
That's easier said than done, Bill. It takes forever to get an appointment, and then you still have to wait ages when you get there.
Perhaps you should change your doctor in that case. Anyway, you're not the only one with problems. Neither Bill nor I have been feeling too great recently.
Why? What's the problem?
Well, I haven't been sleeping too well recently. It's all the stress of the exams, I suppose. What's the best way to get a good night's sleep? Any ideas?
One thing to do about it is to relax with a good book for an hour before you go to bed and forget about the exams.
That's not a bad idea, but I'm not sure that it would work.
I think Mark's right, Bill. Maybe you could try having a cup of tea while you're reading. It worked for me when I was having trouble sleeping. Tea is good for you, you know.
Yes, I suppose so. It's worth a try at least. Anyway, I think Sophie's problem is far more worrying.
Why? What's the matter, Sophie?
Bill is exaggerating, Mark. It's nothing serious, I'm sure. I just get these dizzy spells from time to time. As if I'm going to faint.
And you've been on that silly diet for over a month now. I think that's the cause of the problem.
Yes, but I've got to lose some weight, Bill. So what should I do?
I suggest that you change your diet.
You'd better see a dietitian. Some of these diets can be dangerous if you don't get proper nutrition. A good dietitian will tell you how much weight you need to lose and the best way to go about it.
Yes, I suppose so. So what about you, Mark? Perhaps you should see a dietitian too.
Oh, I don't know. I'll just be glad when these exams are over and we can get back to normal.
Well, it's up to you, Mark. Gosh, look at the time. Come on, we'll be late for the lecture.
Unit 2.5, Exercise 6, page 45.
World of work.
Calling for help. In the UK, people can dial 999 when they need assistance from one of Britain's state-run emergency services, namely the police, the fire service, the ambulance service, the Coast Guard, mountain rescue and cave rescue. Most countries have a similar phone call system with 3 numbers that are easy to remember and simple to dial, so that the service you need can get to you as soon as possible.
Fitting the job requirements. The job interview is a way for employers to get to know the candidates on a more personal basis. They already know about the candidate's qualifications and qualities, interests and free time activities. They have already decided that he or she is suitable for the job. What they need to know now is whether or not he or she is the best candidate for the job.
Mainly teamwork. The title of the job may be news editor, but don't expect to be ordering around all your fellow workers. There are several levels to the job. The lowest rung on the career ladder is delivering mail and making coffee. The highest rung involves important decisions that affect people's lives. Most of the time, the job involves close cooperation from everyone to get the news bulletin on the air in the quickest time.
Help on the phone. It makes a real difference to the lives of the general public and saves the valuable time of doctors nationwide. NHS Direct is a phone line that allows people with health problems to call and speak to a qualified professional. This person will then give practical advice over the phone. This means that minor complaints can be dealt with quickly and calmly without the necessity of making an appointment at the doctor's surgery.
Troubling news.
State-of-the-art technology has transformed the way we get news. There are news networks that broadcast 24 hours a day. And even the entertainment channels will take time out of their busy schedule to broadcast breaking news. These days, the mass media are everywhere. We just can't get away. Some people say that this is a positive development, but research has shown that listening to a lot of bad news can make people more stressed and anxious.
Changing work conditions. The 9-to-5 Monday to Friday job is under threat, as working habits are being adjusted to meet the demands of 21st century lifestyles. Employees can work flexi-time, which means that they decide the hours they work. People often work part-time and may have 2 or more jobs. Working from home is becoming an increasingly popular option as commuting to work becomes more of a problem. On the other hand, job security is a thing of the past.
A talent in demand. It is not the kind of job where you start at the bottom and work your way up. You either have the ability or you don't. They call him the Nose, and the Nose has an impressive skill. Due to his extraordinary sense of smell, all the perfume companies are in fierce competition for his services. With just one sniff of a new perfume, he can tell exactly what it needs to be the most popular scent of the season.
Unit 2.7, Exercise 1B, page 48.
I see your favourite cafe is in trouble, Mary.
What do you mean?
The bistro. It's been closed, apparently. It seems they had a visit from the food inspectors, and they didn't like what they found.
Why? Was it dirty or something?
Worse than that. The place was crawling with mice. The inspectors said it's the worst case they've ever seen.
I don't believe that. I've always found the bistro to be spotlessly clean, and their sandwiches are fantastic.
Well, I don't suppose you've ever seen the kitchen, have you? That's where the inspectors found the problem.
You mean they actually saw mice in the kitchen?
Not exactly, but they found plenty of evidence. You know, mouse droppings and so on.
Yuck, that's disgusting. So does that mean the cafe's closed for good?
Apparently not. The owners have been given 1 month to clean the place up and make sure no mice can get in again. They have to pay a big fine as well, £15,000.
Well, whatever they do, I don't think I'll be going back there.
It's a shame, isn't it? It was one of the few places where you could get a cup of coffee without having to pay a fortune.
Exactly. A large coffee for only 70 pence is almost unheard of these days.
Exercise 3, page 48. Speaker 1.
I learned to cook from my gran. She was a brilliant cook, and as a child I loved being in the kitchen with her, mainly because I got to taste all her lovely food as it was cooking. But she was very strict about hygiene. Her golden rule was that every time you handled a piece of food, you had to wash your hands before touching anything else. At the time, I thought she was being too fussy. I didn't think it was necessary to be so careful, but I realize now that she was absolutely right.
Speaker 2.
As a hotel chef, I have to keep an eye on all the staff working in my kitchen, especially if they are new to the job. Sometimes they make unbelievable errors. I remember one time I had asked a young lad to chop some chicken and then prepare the vegetables. I turned round and saw that he was slicing an onion on the same board we use for meat. He had no idea that you should always use a separate board for meat products.
Speaker 3.
Whenever I eat at a restaurant, and it doesn't matter if it's an expensive one or a moderately priced one, I always ask to see the kitchen. The dining area might look lovely and clean, but that doesn't mean the kitchen is. Most restaurants don't mind in the least, and are quite happy to let you have a quick look. Funnily enough, it's the pricey restaurants that tend to say no, as they seem to think it's an insult. If a restaurant refuses, though, I just leave, and I don't go back either.
Speaker 4.
I work in nutrition hygiene, and it never fails to amaze me that the vast majority of people are under the impression that most cases of food poisoning result from food prepared in restaurants or other professional kitchens. But the truth is that most cases occur in people's own homes. This is because a lot of people don't know much about food safety at all. On the other hand, people working in a professional kitchen have had the proper training, so they know all the do's and don'ts about preparing food safely.
Speaker 5.
I don't like eating out at all. I don't mean just at restaurants, but at other people's houses too. I know where I am with my own food, and I don't trust others to have the same standards as I do. When we go on holiday, we always go self-catering, so that's not a problem. But if we get invited out for a meal anywhere, my husband gets quite embarrassed about explaining why we can't go. If it's something really important like a wedding reception, I'll just pick at bits of food and say I'm not hungry.
Speaker 6. I've never really been one for cooking. It's too time-consuming and I'm always on the go. I've got my favourite places to eat in my hometown, and I can't say I have ever had a problem with the food at any of them. If I go away somewhere, I try to find out where the best places to eat are before I leave. The only time I had a really bad experience was in France, would you believe it? But it was a stomach virus, not the food. I couldn't eat for days. Exercise 4, page 48.
Until not very long ago, going out for a meal in a restaurant was a rare treat, reserved for special occasions such as birthdays and anniversaries. Today, however, the restaurant trade is booming. So, how can you be sure that the food you are eating is safe? James Fisher is a food safety inspector with North Cornwall District Council. James, are we at risk if we go out to eat?
By and large, the answer is of course not. But unfortunately, the number of food poisoning cases that are reported to the authorities is on the rise. In recent years, more than 1 million cases annually. And that figure obviously does not include minor cases where the sufferers have not seen a doctor.
Just how serious is it if a person is affected by food poisoning?
In the majority of cases, a person suffering from food poisoning will experience stomachache, diarrhea and possibly vomiting. These symptoms may last for 2 or 3 days, and while unpleasant, they are not usually life-threatening, fortunately. However, if the victim is already unwell for another reason, or if they are babies or very old, the problem can be very serious, especially if the illness is caused by E. coli.
We've been hearing a lot about E. coli recently. Could you tell us what it is and why it is dangerous?
E. coli is the name given to a type of bacteria that lives in our intestines. Normally, we can live with them quite happily, but there is one type, known as E. coli 0157, that can make people dangerously ill.
I see. And can anything be done to prevent people being infected with E. coli 0157?
Well, this is where people like me come in. This particular form of food poisoning is usually passed on by raw or undercooked meat. So when we inspect a restaurant, we are particularly interested in checking that raw meat is not stored with other foods, and that all meat is thoroughly cooked. It is also important that staff who have been handling raw meat wash and dry their hands thoroughly before touching other types of food. People should take the same precautions in their own homes, of course.
So what do you do if you find a restaurant that is not up to standard? Close it down?
We do have the power to close down any restaurant or food shop that is not up to standard, yes. But in most cases, we prefer to issue a warning and give the owners time to clean up their act. Unfortunately, anyone can open a restaurant. You do not need a license or any qualifications. So in many cases, the problems are caused by ignorance. Not realizing the danger of using the same knife and board to cut meat and vegetables, for example.
Because that could pass on infections like E. coli 0157?
Exactly. To be honest, I think that most restaurant owners and chefs want their premises to have a good reputation. They won't stay in business for very long if the word gets around that their food makes people ill after all. So I see an important part of my job as being education. If I can teach people to maintain high safety standards, that is far better than forcing a place to close down. I don't want people to lose their jobs after all.
So, generally speaking, people take notice of what you say?
Happily, yes. In fact, we frequently have people wanting to start a food establishment, a cafe or a restaurant, coming to us for advice before they open for business. That makes my job a lot easier, because I know that I am more likely to find a clean, well-run kitchen when I visit their premises.
How frequently do you visit places, in fact?
Not as frequently as I would like, unfortunately. As you said at the beginning, there has been a boom in the food trade in recent years, and new restaurants seem to open every day. We really need more inspectors, as I would like to see all premises inspected at least once every 6 months. At the moment, it is once every 18 months on average.
You say once every 18 months on average, so presumably some premises are inspected more frequently than that.
Of course, if we identify a problem. In that case, the owner can expect a surprise visit at any time. The problem for the public is that they are not allowed to inspect the kitchens for themselves. A restaurant may look very clean and attractive in the public areas, but it can be a very different story when you go behind the scenes, as it were. I don't want to give your listeners the wrong impression, though. On the whole, I have to say that things are getting better. Standards are definitely improving, and the new scheme requiring restaurants to display inspection results where they can clearly be seen by customers should help tremendously.
Does that mean potential customers will be able to read your reports in the restaurant? With the menu, perhaps?
Not exactly. That would be taking things a little too far, I think. As you know, several organizations already operate a star system for restaurants, based on the quality of service, atmosphere, and the taste of the food on offer. One idea being discussed is that restaurants should be awarded stars to show how well they comply with health and safety standards. 5 stars would mean that the restaurant maintains the very best standards.
And a restaurant that had only 1 star would best be avoided, I presume.
Well, it would certainly mean that there was a lot of room for improvement, yes. But there are a lot of details to be worked out before we can say we have a scheme that will satisfy everybody. A lot of restaurant owners doubt whether the scheme would operate fairly because there are not enough inspectors to make it work, and I think that I agree with them. I have been saying for a long time that we need more inspectors.
Well, it is good to know that we do have people out there looking after our health. James, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Exercise 5, page 49.
As part of our focus on health and safety in the home this week, I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Susan Drake from the A&E Department of Bristol General Hospital. Dr. Drake, welcome to the studio.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Perhaps we could start by talking about common accidents in the home. I imagine that most accidents occur in the kitchen, don't they?
Well, accidents in the kitchen are very common, of course. But you might be surprised to learn that most accidents actually happen in the living room. When you think about it, this is where people spend most of their time when they are not sleeping, of course. Another common place for accidents to occur is on the stairs.
So what sort of injuries do you see most in your work?
Oh dear, just about everything you can imagine, and a lot more besides. Fortunately, the majority of injuries are of a relatively minor nature in medical terms. We treat a lot of people with cuts that may require a few stitches or broken bones. Very painful for the patient, but not life-threatening.
What's the most unusual domestic injury you've ever seen?
I think the strangest one was when a lady slipped on some water in her kitchen as she was loading her dishwasher. As she fell, she cut her arm quite badly on a knife in the dishwasher, but she also broke her hip, which was far more serious. Luckily, in this case, the lady was not alone in the house, and so the ambulance service got to her very quickly, and she made a full recovery. Unfortunately, broken hips are quite common in older people. The bones often become weak as we get older, so old people need to take extra care.
A good example of why old people should always carry a personal alarm so that they can call for help in an emergency. Now, I have some statistics here that show the rate.
Exercise 6B, page 49.
Although 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, only 1% of the world's fresh water is accessible to the 6 billion people on the planet. In regions such as Africa, extreme water shortages can have devastating consequences for the population. Alex Cameron has spent the past 20 years working in Africa, helping to develop water resources, and is here to tell us about the importance of safe drinking water for everyone.
I think the problem of water shortages is one that even people in Britain can relate to. Many people have had to endure hosepipe bans during the summer and learn to be more efficient with water to keep their beloved gardens alive. But here we take it for granted that our water is completely safe to drink. This isn't the case for millions and millions of people in Africa.
Can you tell us about some of the problems this causes?
First and foremost is, of course, the potential for disease. Lack of clean water results in deadly diseases such as cholera and typhoid, amongst many others. And dirty water causes ordinary childhood diarrhea, which is one of the main causes of death among African children. Poor African children are 10 times more likely to die before they are 5 than a child from a developed country. Most of these deaths can be prevented simply by providing clean water and making sure that people know how to maintain good standards of hygiene.
What other difficulties do water shortages lead to?
As water supplies become harder to find in times of drought, the people in the countryside have to spend increasing amounts of time searching for it. They can spend up to 8 hours a day collecting just enough water for the bare essentials, leaving very little time to look after their farms and families. This often forces people to move to the cities, and many traditional communities are losing their way of life.
Are the conditions any better in the cities?
A little, but not much. In urban areas, about 50% of the water supply is wasted due to poor management. The water pipes in cities are very old and constantly leak, and people don't use the water they have efficiently. Also, as the populations in cities rise, there is more and more pressure on the water system. Hygiene and sanitation standards are very low, and so more people become ill.
It sounds like a very complicated problem.
It is, and it's not getting any better either. African governments have been working towards providing safe and sustainable water supplies for 78% of the population by 2015. Unfortunately, the money needed to ensure this is just not available, as companies don't want to invest in something that doesn't make a lot of profit. It is now predicted that the number of people with no access to safe water will actually rise a further 50 million by 2015.
So, is the situation hopeless?
Not at all. Many aid and development agencies, like the one I work for, are doing a great deal to tackle the problem. We work directly with the affected communities to develop sustainable water supplies. Not only do we help to provide working wells, but we give people in the community training on efficient use of water resources and how to maintain hygiene standards to reduce diseases.
Is there anything that ordinary people can do to help?
Absolutely. Firstly, you can help by making more people aware of the water problems Africa faces. The more people know about the devastation unsafe water causes, the more likely that governments of the world will be forced to do something about it. You could also do some fundraising in your community, or even make a personal donation, however small. Every little bit helps to build more wells.
You have given us some very valuable insight into the situation. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Unit 2.8. Exercises 2 and 3, page 50.
Hello, you two. Paula, thanks for the book you sent me. It helped me a lot with my essay.
Think nothing of it. I was just glad I could help. Anyway, what are you doing this Saturday? Have you got any plans? John and I can't agree on what to do, actually.
Oh, what's the problem?
Well, I'd like to try that new fast food restaurant near the university because I've heard it's really cheap and it has a nice friendly atmosphere. Unfortunately, Paula doesn't agree.
No, really, John. I can't stand going to fast food places anymore. They all look the same. They're noisy and they all serve the same sort of fried food. The choice is so limited. I would love to go to a good restaurant. You know, a place where you get served by waiters who know their job and you have a good varied menu to choose from. I've heard that the Salamander in King Street is fantastic.
I don't really like the idea of going to an expensive restaurant. I know the food might be good and all that, but I can't really afford it. And besides, it's also formal. You can never relax properly.
I think you're right, Mary. So you agree that we should give the fast food place a try?
I didn't say that, John. No, I disagree with you, actually. I think Paula's right when she says they are noisy places. People trying to make themselves heard over the sound of loud music. To be honest, I'd be quite happy if we went to Gino's. They've got excellent coffee and it's such a relaxing atmosphere.
No way, Mary. You're wrong there. I think going to a cafe is just boring. It's the sort of thing we can do every day. There's nothing special about it, is there?
You've got a point there, I suppose. But what's so special about eating fast food? People do that every day as well.
Yes, I agree, Mary. There's nothing exciting about going to a fast food place. But I don't want to go to a cafe either. Oh, well, I think I'll just stay at home and watch television since we can't agree what to do.
Well, I don't know about that. Tell you what, come round to my flat and I'll cook for the three of us. My mum has just sent me some of her Italian recipes. They all seem easy to cook and they're bound to be tasty. Do you both agree to that?
Absolutely.
Me too.
Exercise 5, page 51.
I'm going to talk about eating out, including the reasons people eat out, the advantages and disadvantages, and my own personal experience. To begin with, there are many reasons why people eat out. There are busy working couples who don't want to think about preparing a meal and washing up after a long day at work. Then there are single people who don't like to eat alone and prefer to go out with their friends. Or business people who take their clients out for a meal. When people are away on holiday, they often eat out, and on the whole I'd say eating out is often a form of entertainment. One of the main reasons many people go out for a meal is to celebrate a special occasion, such as a birthday or an anniversary. Furthermore, some people like to eat out to try different foods from other countries. There are many advantages to eating out. One advantage is the relaxing atmosphere of a restaurant. It's a great place to unwind at the end of a busy day. Discussing business over a meal is a way to entertain clients away from the office, and also a way to relax and get to know one another. For other people, it makes a change from eating at home, and it means they can have a choice of what to eat. On the whole, I'd say that having someone else cook, serve your meal, and clear up afterwards is a great reason for eating out. In addition, I think most people would agree that if we want to enjoy food from a different country, it's best to have it cooked by people from that country, and to enjoy it in a restaurant with the right atmosphere as well. One of the negative points of eating out is that it can be expensive. Sometimes the quality of the food or the service may be poor. The expense is the main reason many people only eat out for special occasions. Of course, unless the restaurant has been recommended, you can't be sure of the quality of the food or service, and it may be disappointing or even disastrous. If a restaurant is popular, it can also be noisy. In England, smoking in restaurants is not allowed, but in other countries people smoke in restaurants, which is a problem for non-smokers. As far as I'm concerned, I usually go out to eat with my family about once a month. We like to try new places occasionally, but my favourite place to eat is the Chinese restaurant. I love eating with chopsticks.
Exercise 6B, page 51.
How about fast food for the end-of-year school party? The way I see it, everyone likes it, it's cheap, and it can be quickly prepared. What do you think?
I agree with you that it would be popular, but as far as I'm concerned, I think it's far too unhealthy. In any case, perhaps it's a bit boring, because we could have that any day.
Yes, we could, I suppose. I see what you mean. What do you suggest?
Maybe we could have a barbecue. That would be fun, and barbecue food is tasty and popular in the summer.
It's a nice choice, but the trouble with a barbecue is that it depends on the weather, and the food has to be cooked on the spot. You never know in this country, do you? You can't rely on the weather in the summer here. It could rain.
That's a good point. It's a pity, because I'm sure everyone would enjoy it, but we don't want to risk the possibility of it being a washout, do we? Well, what else is there?
We could have a 3-course dinner. That would be tasty, and then the weather doesn't matter.
Sure, but I think it's too formal for a school party, and it can also be expensive, so I don't think so. How about the cold stand-up buffet instead?
Oh yes, that would be fine. With the cold buffet, there's a variety of choice to suit everyone, so they can select their own food. So far, it seems like the best choice.
The only problem with it is that it's sometimes awkward to hold your food while you eat. But I think you're right. Overall, it would be the best.
I don't think we have to worry too much. There will be places to sit down. If people want to, they can do so. And the best thing is, it's cheap.
Yes, that's very true. I think we can agree that the buffet is the best option. It will give everyone the opportunity to circulate and meet each other. And after all, that's what an end-of-year party should be about.
Unit 2.12. Exercise 6, page 58.
British and Russian food. Breakfast of Champions. We know that eating a good breakfast helps us to learn better and work more efficiently, and it gives us the energy to keep on playing when others go home exhausted. We know all this, and yet most of us run out of the house every morning after only a hurried cup of coffee or a rushed glass of milk. Perhaps it's time to make the traditional breakfast a more regular feature of our daily routine. Take the English breakfast, for example. Eat one of these, and you probably won't need anything else until the end of the day. Fried eggs, crispy bacon, and sizzling sausages straight from the frying pan take pride of place on the English breakfast table. Add a slice of toast generously topped with fresh butter, jam or marmalade, and you have a meal worth waking up for. Cold climates call for something warm at the beginning of the day, and Russia is no exception. The early morning aroma of home-cooked blini can drag even the deepest sleeper out from under the duvet. The huge variety of toppings mean that this is one breakfast dish that will never become boring. If that did happen, you could try kasha instead. This is a type of porridge usually made from buckwheat, like the best blini, and eaten with whatever you like, meat, fish, or fruit. And what do these feasts have in common? Whether it's from a samovar or a teapot, The perfect partner to these traditional breakfasts is the humble cup of tea, a drink shared by nations and enjoyed across distant continents. Something good on the go. Forget the cheeseburger and fries. The best fast food has been available for decades, and you don't have to travel to the centre of town to find a restaurant. It's on the streets in your local neighbourhood. If you're out and about in Moscow, you must try some delicious pirozhiki. These are like pies, but smaller and with soft golden brown dough that's filled with whatever you like: fruit, cheese, meat or fish. Versions of this popular dish are found all across Eastern Europe and loved by visitors from all over the world. Visiting London? Why not try the famous fish and chips? With crispy batter on the outside and delicious white fish inside, it's the perfect treat at the end of the day. It's probably best to eat the full meal, either at home or in the shop, but you'll see many people wandering around town eating a portion of chips. There are many local alternatives to fast food, most of them healthier and cheaper. So forget the burger bar for a while and try the wealth of great food that's just around the corner from the place where you live.
Unit 2.13. Exercise 3, page 60.
The War of the Worlds. The thing itself lay almost completely buried in sand. Among the scattered parts of a fir tree, it had smashed to pieces on its way down. The uncovered part had the appearance of a huge cylinder, its outline softened by a thick coating. It had a diameter of about 30 yards. He approached the object, surprised at the size and even more at the shape, since most meteorites are rounded almost completely. It was, however, still so hot from its flight through the air that he couldn't touch it. A stirring noise within its cylinder, he guessed, was due to the uneven cooling of its surface, for at that time he had not thought that it might be hollow. He remained standing at the edge of the pit that the thing had made for itself, staring at its strange appearance, surprised mainly at its unusual shape and colour, and wondering even then why it had arrived on Earth. The early morning was wonderfully still, and the sun, just clearing the pine trees towards Weybridge, was already warm. He did not remember hearing any birds that morning. There was certainly no breeze stirring, and the only sounds were the faint movements from within the soot-covered cylinder. He was all alone on the common. Then suddenly he noticed that some of the ashy coating that covered the meteorite was falling off the rounded edge of the end. It was dropping off in flakes and raining down upon the sand. A large piece suddenly came off and fell with a sharp noise that brought his heart into his mouth. He realized that he was sweating and his knees were knocking. For a minute, he hardly realized what this meant, and although the heat was excessive, he climbed down into the pit to see the thing more clearly. He thought then that the cooling of the body might be the reason for this, but what disturbed that idea was the fact that the ash was falling only from the end of the cylinder. And then he noticed that very slowly the circular top of the cylinder was turning on its body. It was such a gradual movement that he discovered it only through noticing that a black mark that had been near him 5 minutes ago was now at the other side of the circumference. Even then he hardly understood what this meant until he heard a grating sound and saw the black mark jerk forward an inch or so. Then the thing came upon him in a flash. The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top.
Good heavens,
said Ogilvy.
There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape.
At once, with a quick idea in his mind, he quickly linked the thing with the flash upon Mars. The thought of the trapped creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn it. But luckily, the dull radiation stopped him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal. At that, he stood unsure for a moment, then turned, scrambled out of the pit, and set off running wildly towards Woking.
Exercise 6A, page 61.
Ogilvy ran into the town. On the way, he met a man who drove a horse and cart. Ogilvy was so excited, and he tried to tell the man about the cylinder. But he looked so wild and crazy that the man just drove away. Then he saw the innkeeper. He started to tell him the story of the strange object that had fallen from the sky. But the innkeeper thought Ogilvy was a madman and didn't listen to him at all. Ogilvy calmed down a little bit. Suddenly, he saw Henderson, a London journalist. He was working in his garden. Ogilvy shouted out to him. He asked if he had seen the bright object in the sky the night before. Henderson said that he had. Ogilvy told him that the same object was now on the Horsell Common. Henderson was so surprised. He thought that it was a fallen meteorite, but Ogilvy told him that it was something much more than a meteorite. He said that the object was a hollow cylinder, and there was something inside it. Henderson listened, and Ogilvy told him everything he had seen. It took Henderson a while to understand what Ogilvy was saying. After he heard the story, Henderson dropped his spade and grabbed his jacket. The two men hurried back to the common. The cylinder was in the same place, and they could see a circle of bright metal. There was a strange sizzling sound as if air was going into or coming out of the cylinder. The men listened carefully and tapped the metal cylinder with a stick. There was no response. Maybe the men inside were stunned or dead, they thought. There was nothing they could do. They shouted to the men in the cylinder that they were going to get help. They promised to come back. Both men were covered in sand and looked very untidy as they ran through the streets. It was early in the morning, and people were just getting up. Henderson went straight to the railway station to send a telegram to London about the cylinder. By 8 o'clock, lots of people had heard that there were aliens on the common. They gathered to see the cylinder.
Unit 2.14, Exercise 3, page 62.
Why does food go bad? Food and acidity. The pH scale, which ranges from 1 to 14, measures whether something is an acid or an alkali. A solution with a pH value under 7 is an acid, whereas a solution with a pH value of more than 7 is an alkali. Anything with a pH value of 7 is considered neutral. For example, Citrus fruits, which have a pH value of about 2, are acidic, while pure water is neutral. The acidity of food is important because it affects the taste and the rate at which microorganisms grow in the food. Food and microorganisms. Molds, yeasts and bacteria are 3 types of microorganisms that cause food to spoil. Molds are microorganisms made of spores that move through the air and land on food. We can avoid eating moldy food because mold grows in colonies, so we can see it. Yeasts are single-celled organisms that can be found on the skin of fruit, which make fruit go bad. Bacteria are single-celled microorganisms which multiply by splitting in 2. They are the most dangerous microorganisms because they are not visible to the naked eye. E. coli and Salmonella are 2 deadly bacteria that can hide in food. They need warmth, moisture and time to grow on food, so we can prevent bacterial food poisoning by keeping dishes, surfaces and utensils clean, cool and dry. Oxidation. Exposure to oxygen in the air also affects food. For example, an apple will quickly turn brown once it has been cut or peeled. This is because of a reaction between the natural proteins called enzymes in the fruit and the oxygen in the air. We can reduce this effect and stop food such as fruit and vegetables from turning brown by adding a natural acid, for example lemon juice, putting them in boiling water for 10 seconds to destroy the enzymes, or by preserving them in a sugary solution such as syrup. Temperature. We can help food to stay fresh longer by either heating or cooling it. UHT products are termed long life because they are ultra-heat treated. This means they are heated to a temperature of about 149 degrees centigrade for 6 to 9 seconds and then quickly cooled. This destroys the bacteria. Keeping food in the fridge at 0 degrees centigrade to 3 degrees centigrade will slow the growth of bacteria and keep food fresh for longer. Freezing food at -18 degrees centigrade or lower keeps bacteria dormant. We should always make sure that we heat frozen foods to a temperature of 72 degrees centigrade or more to cook the food properly and kill any bacteria present. This way, we can avoid getting food poisoning.
Module 2. Focus on RNE. Listening Part 1, page 66. Speaker 1.
I'm a teacher at a junior school, and the school is very committed to teaching the children about respect for the environment. In the playground, the litter bins are divided into different sections, and the children learn how their rubbish will be recycled. The canteen doesn't have any plastic plates, cups or cutlery, and all the cleaning products that are used in the school are environmentally friendly. In addition, all the paper that is used in the school is recycled paper. I believe that the next generation must be shown how to care for the environment, because the future of the planet is in their hands.
Speaker 2.
I try to do my bit to help the environment by reducing the amount of packaging of everything I buy. I buy all my fruit and vegetables from the local market rather than from the supermarkets, where all the produce is pre-packaged. Of course, sometimes I have to shop in the large stores, but I always make sure that I take a bag with me so that I don't have to use a plastic carrier bag. And if I am buying something with a lot of excessive packaging, I'll remove it and leave it at the shop. Sometimes they're not too happy about it, but they can't really say anything. I just hope that they dispose of their refuse responsibly.
Speaker 3.
My mother was green long before it became fashionable. My brother and I would help her carry all our empty bottles to the bottle bank in the supermarket car park. We loved posting the bottles through the slots, mostly for the noise they made when they smashed. but it's definitely had a positive effect on me. I've always tried to recycle as much of our household's rubbish as I could. Since the local council provided us with special containers to separate our rubbish, it's been a lot easier, and now we hardly have any rubbish that has to go to the landfill site.
Speaker 4.
I'm saving all my plastic bottles, and I ask my friends to save theirs for me as well. I read an article on the internet about how to make a greenhouse from plastic bottles, and I'm going to build one for my daughter. She loves growing her own vegetables, and this would help her a lot. I'll need about 1,500 bottles, so it could take a while, but it's a good way to recycle them. There are lots of good ideas for recycling on the internet. I think the younger generation is much more concerned about the environment than my age group are, but I am trying to educate my friends.
Speaker 5.
Quite honestly, I just can't be bothered with all that messing around. Rubbish is rubbish as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure it all ends up at the local landfill site. I haven't got the time to be washing out bottles and cans and folding up newspapers. I live on my own anyway, so I don't produce that much household refuse. I hardly ever cook. I tend to eat out or get a takeaway most nights, so I only go to the supermarket occasionally. When the big companies start caring about the environment, then maybe I will too. But until then, I'll just carry on as usual and throw everything in the dustbin.
Speaker 6.
I know I should do more, but it's hard to find the time to sort through the rubbish. I do separate any vegetable waste that I know is biodegradable, and I put that in my compost maker. My father was a keen gardener, and he always kept a compost heap going at the bottom of the garden. My garden is quite small, so I have a plastic tub which turns the waste into compost without giving off any nasty smells. We also try to save our newspapers and magazines for the local scouts, who come around every fortnight collecting them for recycling.
Listening Part 2, page 66.
Hello, Sue. It seems ages since I last saw you. How are you keeping?
Oh, hi, Bob. It's not been that long. We were both at that party a couple of weeks ago. Remember? Anyway, I'm okay, I suppose. Worried about the exams, of course. But then I imagine that's true for just about everybody. What about you?
I'm all right, I guess. To be honest, I'm a bit more worried about money than the exams.
What do you mean? What's the problem? You don't owe anybody money, do you?
Not really. Well, I owe my father a bit for the bike he helped me buy. But it's not a lot, and I know he won't mind waiting. It's just that I don't want to have to ask my parents for money during the summer. I really would like to get a job if I can, but I don't know how to go about it.
Goodness! Is that all? You had me worried for a minute. Getting a summer job shouldn't be too difficult. I worked for a friend of my mother's last year helping out in her shop.
Really? What sort of shop?
Oh, she has a shop selling clothes for girls. You know, teenage fashions, that sort of thing. Most of the time I had to put the clothes back on the hangers after the kids had tried them on, but the girls did ask me for advice at times. Actually, I'll probably work there again this summer. I quite enjoyed it last year.
Yes, well, I hardly think that would be a suitable job for me, certainly not girls' fashion. Besides, I'm not sure that my parents have any friends who are shopkeepers. That's the problem when your parents are both teachers. Their friends tend to be teachers too.
Oh, come on. It doesn't sound as though you're even trying. What about the university notice boards? Have you checked them?
Yes, I have. The trouble is that I am not the only person trying to find a job, and that's all you can see on the boards. There are no jobs advertised, just notices from people trying to find summer work.
Well, do you have any idea what you would like to do at least?
I don't mind really. All right, I don't think I would be much good working on a building site. I'm just not strong enough for a start. I wouldn't mind working as a waiter or something like that. I like working with people.
There you go then. Why don't you start going around the cafes and restaurants offering your services? You know that a lot of them take on extra staff during the holiday season. They get so busy. I'm sure you'll find something if you put your mind to it. You just need to convince them that you're willing to work hard, even if you don't have any experience.
Actually, I have helped out in the students' cafe sometimes, so I wouldn't be completely useless.
Bob, I don't know what you're worried about. If you've got experience, then I'm sure you'll find something. Now get moving.